We are now joined by Petroleum Specialist Mulife Siyambongo to talk to us about the current fuel situation and how it has affected stakeholders in the country. Now, good evening, and thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Good evening.
All right, now if we just start off with this current situation, we know that service stations across the country have stated that they will close shops due to the fact that they term irregularities in the fuel sector. And briefly, if you can just give us a brief overview of this situation and how it has affected service stations.
Basically, as you know, is that the Minister of Mines is a custodian for petroleum and energy in the country. And that the service station owners, they are bound by the Act of Petroleum Act of 2000 and regulations, which regulates their activities. But at the same time, they do not have ability to regulate the pricing in the industry. So as a result, they find themselves at the foot of the law whenever there is adjustment of petroleum. But in the nutshell, it's not really that the service station owners really want to close. It's just asking for an audience with government to say, look, if government is engaging in a private business where they want to compete independent fuel retailers, what is the leverage that a national oil company like NAMCO is participating while it's being financed by citizens through a tax, and also is also collecting a levy at the pump?
Right.
So that has been the issue at the, yeah.
All right. Service stations have now dropped their margins to 4% and aren't making any profits, as they are saying. How did this situation, how did it get here?
The scenario is that the dealer's margin has reduced because government regulates how much service stations can make profit out of the sales. But this is also affected by the result of increased levies. We are talking about MVA, Roads Fund Authority, roads construction, road administration. You know, then there is NAMCO again, which is collecting about 3.8 cents per liter. Right. At the same time, it's managing the oil storage. It's also building service stations, and it's also collecting levies at the pump. That's why we felt that as private citizens, maybe we have to ask government to say, look, can we have a fair competitive advantage to assist? Because look, out of the 116 service stations which are operating countrywide, this is a huge employment industry. And if it's affected, comparing to the national parastatal, which is backed by the state, again, it's collecting levies from the pump price. Again, also it's using taxpayers' money to fund its operations. So it's a double dipping, which is causing a bit of a shock in the industry.
Right. You did mention NAMCO and also fairness just in your response there. But on one of the issues being raised is the unfairness that the playing field between service stations and NAMCO. Now, for an understanding, NAMCO has also fuel stations. That's quite evident across the country, and it equally collects levies from private service stations, whilst they are in charge of fuel storage in Walvis Bay. But that actually, that government actually owns. But briefly, just break this down for us.
Okay, basically from a nutshell to start, we welcome NAMCO to have a national identity flag of service stations. Because as you know, since independence, we never had a local brand, which is fine. But what we are saying is that NAMCO manages the fuel storage, meaning that the whole 70 million liters is managed by them. So they have a competitive advantage over the industry. But also at the same time, they are also have gone from upstream of who's selling storage to downstream to go and sell to the retailer. Right. Meaning that, to fill up the storage, you need to use taxpayers' money. So now if you go down on the downstream and have service stations, you have a competitive advantage because industry is compelled to buy from the fuel storage. Now industry feels pinched out because the same fuel they buy, when the industry sells it, NAMCO collects 3.8 cents, again, from the private service stations. So we are saying, but look, who is eating on both sides here?
Right.
Yeah, we don't have a problem for NAMCO to have service stations. What we are just saying is that can there be a competitive fairness so that the industry is properly regulated and that everybody feels not cheated. We welcome NAMCO, but we are just saying that advantage they have, it outweighs the private industries.
Right. But how is this situation going to affect everyday Namibians as taxpayers?
It's very sad because you see, NAMCO is a state oil entity which is owned by the state, meaning that is funded by taxpayers. Now, if you have a company which is funded by taxpayers, which is competing against private sector, it becomes very difficult because private sector cannot compete with government. We know there's no way you can compete with the government entity. So it's going to affect, in the long run, we're going to see a reduction of private service stations in the country. Because as margins dwindle, it means that the gross margin returns will be very low in able to sustain these assets that have been established countrywide.
Now, finally, do you think, just briefly, do you think there are remedies that could possibly, be instituted to avert the closure of service stations, but ultimately also contribute to cheap fuel prices? Because not only service stations, but to consumers as well.
Okay, first of all, fuel will never be cheap in the current situation. I have to congratulate NAMCO with its partners for discovering oil because it's within its mandate, which means that it may, in future, it may contribute for cheaper fuel for Namibia if need be. But if fuel pricing cannot be determined by Namibia because it's a global effect. But in the long run, if we have to come up with a solution, probably maybe it's government to relieve NAMCO from the levies and give it its own teeth to run on its own, to be on the same competition with the rest.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mulife.
Thank you.